Let's jump right into today's explainer, mapping out how global trade wars over literal trash are being completely upended by cutting-edge, handheld AI. We're looking at a wild collision of year-to-date headline news, Washington politics, and industrial ecology. We're going to explore how the breakdown of decades-old trade pacts has triggered a massive trans-border waste crisis between Ontario and the US, and more importantly, how localized, offline artificial intelligence is stepping in to engineer a completely new economic reality.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap. We're moving from the macro geopolitics of the USMCA crisis and Ontario's landfill squeeze all the way down to the micro level of edge AI and the circular bioeconomy.
Section 1. The Transborder Waste Pipeline, a massive logistical dependency. To really grasp the sheer physical scale of the municipal solid waste flowing between Ontario and Michigan, you just need to look at one staggering number: 3.46 million tons. That is the volume of trash that Ontario currently exports across the border into Michigan landfills every single year. Just imagine roughly 100,000 semi-trucks, fully loaded, traveling south along Highway 401 annually. It's wild. This isn't just some minor logistical quirk, it's the fundamental safety valve for Ontario's entire waste management infrastructure.
And the dependency goes both ways. That cross-border pipeline from Ontario actually accounts for 14.35% of all waste disposed of in the entire state of Michigan. Think about that for a second. More than 14% of Michigan's landfill intake comes from a single foreign province. That tight, historical integration is exactly why the current political and economic disruptions are sending such massive shockwaves through the entire system.
Section 2. USMCA Trade Crisis Escalation, the Geopolitical Volatility.
So this decades-old supply chain is actively being ripped apart by severe geopolitical friction. Looking at the recent timeline, the volatility is just off the charts. Back in early 2025, the Trump administration in Washington hit Canadian imports with 25% universal tariffs. After a really turbulent period of legal battles, including the U.S. Supreme Court actually striking down those initial IEPA tariffs in early 2026, the whole situation hit a structural breaking point on July 1, 2026. That's when the U.S. formally declined to automatically renew the USMCA, or CUSMA as it's known in Canada. And that single decision triggered a high-stakes era of unpredictable annual reviews and constant tariff threats.
In response to this federal trade gridlock, regional leaders have literally had to take matters into their own hands. Ontario Premier Doug Ford pivoted hard to independent subnational diplomacy, launching a direct lobbying mission targeting Washington and U.S. state leaders. He's pitching this tightly integrated regional economic zone he calls Fortress AMCAN. It's a bold, direct attempt to completely bypass the federal impasses and secure the cross-border economic flows, especially waste management, that Ontario so desperately relies on.
Section 3. Ontario's domestic landfill squeeze, the impending capacity crisis.
The problem is, Ontario can't just flip a switch and stop exporting to the U.S. without facing an immediate, massive domestic crisis. It all comes down to stark economic arbitrage. Historically, Michigan has charged this incredibly low state levy of just 36 cents per ton for landfill waste. Compare that to Ontario's standard domestic tipping fee, which sits at a whopping $60 per ton. Of course the trucks are heading south. But to curb this massive influx of imported trash, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer is actively pushing to hike that state fee up to $5. As costs and trade barriers skyrocket, the old model is rapidly collapsing.
And here is the terrifying reality for Canada. If that border effectively closes due to tariffs or fees, Ontario is projected to completely exhaust its total domestic landfill space between 2034 and 2037. We're talking less than a decade. This looming capacity crisis has already forced the provincial government to try and fast-track local landfill expansions like the highly controversial Dresden site under Bill 5. But these emergency domestic measures, they've sparked intense local and Indigenous protest. The traditional system of simply burying trash is facing total systemic failure from absolutely all sides.
Section 4. 905 Wood, the Sentient Bridge, bypassing geopolitical hurdles.
Now, here is where deep technology steps in to fix what diplomacy simply cannot. We are talking about a complete paradigm shift in industrial ecology. Enter the 905 Wood digital refinery workflow. In the industry, this application is being called a sentient bridge. What does that actually mean? Well, it means using advanced AI to bridge the massive gap between a chaotic, mixed pile of municipal and construction waste and the incredibly strict,
high-purity requirements of the global biocarbon market. Instead of fighting over where to bury waste, the goal is to instantly refine it into a highly valuable commodity, right there at the source.
Section 5. Pixel 10 Pro Edge AI. On-device industrial ecology.
Let's get into exactly how this works in the very real, very dirty hands of field operators at a waste intake yard. The workflow engineered by 905 is virtually seamless. An operator literally just points the camera of a Google Pixel 10 Pro at a pile of chaotic waste. Immediately, the AI runs semantic categorization of the materials. It executes a rigorous 12-stage TCLP pre-screening, that's toxicity characteristic leaching procedure, by the way, instantly identifying wood species, estimating moisture content, and screening out potential contaminants to classify a high-purity wood grade. Boom. Done. To break down the technical jargon here, this device isn't frantically trying to send data to the cloud. Google's Light LRT AI stack executes real-time zero-latency computer vision locally. It's processing everything directly on the Pixel 10 Pro's internal tensor processing unit, running Android 16, requiring absolutely zero cellular connectivity. This localized edge AI is a total game-changer for remote, dusty intake yards where cell service is notoriously terrible or just plain non-existent.
Section 6. Securing the circular bioeconomy. Economic sovereignty through technology.
And here is where we tie this localized tech back to those massive macro-financial challenges we talked about. Once the Edge AI analyzes the waste, the 905 App's UI instantly outputs everything needed for a commercial transaction. We're talking real-time volume and density estimation, which then generates a dynamic request for quote, or RFQ. But crucially for the regulators, it automatically generates a certificate of origin, automated verification, and a fully structured compliance PDF document. It quite literally turns a chaotic pile of trash into a compliant, fully auditable product in seconds.
Which brings us to the ultimate financial payoff. By officially classifying, processing, and diverting this material right at the source under Ontario Regulation 347, operators completely sidestep that crippling $60 per ton domestic landfill tipping fee we highlighted earlier. By operationalizing the Pixel 10 Pro and the Light RT stack to bypass landfills entirely, 905 effectively secures Ontario's industrial leadership in the global circular bioeconomy. It renders these tense trade wars over trash essentially irrelevant for these materials.
I want to highlight a specific thought from our source material because it just perfectly summarizes our deep dive today. Quote, geopolitical borders might close and trade pacts might enter a decade of rolling uncertainty, but physics and economics don't lie. End quote. Because honestly, no matter what happens in Washington or Ottawa with CUSMA tariffs turning chaotic waste into highly valuable, compliant biocarbon, will always be economically superior to just burying it in the ground.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with a provocative question to chew on. As the world deglobalizes and these decades-old trade pacts begin to fracture, how could localized edge AI and decentralized technology solve macro supply chain vulnerabilities in your industry? The blueprint is already running right now on a smartphone at a waste yard in Ontario. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and remember to keep questioning how the micro can solve the macro.